For most people who don't know that, it originally was blood pressure medication before it did what it does now.
And then one guy just had an erection for 4 hours and was like, what the hell is this?
And then had to go to the hospital.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Nick Morgasen. This is another episode of Moving the Goalposts. And you can follow us across social media, this show at MTGP ETB. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network across social media at ETB Network. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMart. You can follow Nick at Morgasen Radio. You can watch all Empty the Bench shows on youtube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to all Empty the Bench shows on ETBpodcast.com. And you can listen to Moving the Goalposts wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure to like and subscribe. And this show is, Moving the Goalposts, is presented by Playback. Stay tuned to find out more. All right, so we have a lot to get to, a lot of free agency. We're both Jet fans, so there's a whole lot of, almost all of these stories, or many of these stories, have something to do with the Jets, whether it's a player directly signing with the Jets or just an ex-Jets player. Maybe we're making everything about us, but it all of it really kind of comes back to the Jets. And Justin Fields signs with the Jets, 2 years, $40 million. What can go wrong with this move?
What could possibly go wrong? 2 years, $40 million, $30 million, fully guaranteed. Yeah. This is such a Jets move if I ever saw one. And this is not the answer. This is a plug. Like it's more like a temporary Band-Aid than an answer at a quarterback. They might have been better off bringing Sam Darnold back more than going after Justin Fields, if that's the direction.
But would that have been your answer, though?
No.
Not saying Sam Darnold would have been a long-term answer, but you know what, though? I think Sam Darnold is really just as good as the situation is.
Yeah and no. I mean, I think this goes to, and we'll talk about Darnold later, but when you have one good year, that gets you a big contract. That's how it goes in all professional sports. But what is Justin Fields? What track record does Justin Fields have to get 2 years, $40 million, and 30 guaranteed?
None. He has. I mean, he wasn't even able to remain a starter in Pittsburgh.
He got beaten out by Russell Wilson. And when I say beaten out, I mean because they had no other choice on the roster, so they just went with Russell Wilson.
Yeah. By the way, I love how I still get notifications coming from different apps that say Jets sign quarterback. Yeah, I know. I've gotten you're late to the party.
I saw it, and of course, because we all follow all the insiders, because the day that we're recording this is the beginning of the legal tampering period for the NFL free agency period. And I see that, and my mouth literally dropped, like, in shock when I saw Justin Fields was the guy the Jets went after. You didn't go after anybody else. You couldn't make a move. You didn't try and go after Matthew Stafford, maybe. You probably could have had Matthew Stafford if you made the right offer.
Well, wait, were you shocked, though, that because there were rumblings about the Jets going after Justin Fields for quite a few weeks now, or maybe at least 1 week. For quite a while, people were talking about the Jets getting Justin Fields. In fact, there were so many on the last show, or no, not on the last show, but when I was preparing for the show, I put Jets interested in Justin Fields as one of my topics. So there were rumblings about it for a while.
But I don't understand this. This is not helping the Jets situation. Now, let's be very clear. The Jets are in full rebuild mode right now after getting rid of Devontae and getting rid of Aaron Rodgers. And not that Aaron Rodgers was anything to write home about by any means.
Well, he was a lot to write home about, just not in a good way.
Well, not on the field. The only guy that is really worth any value right now is Garrett Wilson. And that's the only guy you have. And I don't know if you saw the post on Instagram where when the report came out that they signed Justin Fields, he actually liked the post. Did you see that or no? Yeah, on Instagram.
Well, I don't think that's a crazy sign because he's just kind of supporting his team.
I don't know. I just thought that was a little strange. Like, that's the answer. Let me like the post.
No, you know what though? If Garrett Wilson, which that might be what he's saying, but I don't really get. I'm not mad at the players for endorsing moves that their team makes. I would rather players do that than like bash the team publicly on social media.
I get it, but this is not the answer. And again,
No.
this might make sense in some capacity for 2 years because this gives them the ability to retool and have a guy at quarterback. Now, if they could somehow unlock the potential of Justin Fields, maybe they have a gold mine, depending.
Okay, yeah, because for all the years that we've watched the Jets, one thing that they're known for doing is unlocking the potential for quarterback.
Okay, I didn't say that that's exactly their strong suit. Let me be very clear about that. But if they could somehow get him to be halfway decent and open up his game, $20 million a year doesn't look so bad in the scheme of things.
No. Well, that's the thing. I really don't have that much of an issue with this move. Like, you're saying it's not the answer. And you're right. But like, what would they have done? What could they have done in this offseason that would have been the answer? There is no answer. It's just temporary. Like, that's where the Jets are right now. And they signed him for 2 years. I mean, I would agree if they had given him this massive contract, but they signed him for 2 years, $40 million. Maybe you could argue they overpaid for him, but the market for quarterbacks is so high anyway that $20 million might not really be that much.
I think I'm more frustrated at the fact that it's such a Jets move, making that move. Like, they weren't trying to do anything to help their future. That was like a now plug-in move. They're not looking to do anything to improve this team to make Garrett Wilson want to stay.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, though. There's nothing that they could have done in this offseason that would have been, like, I'm not saying I love this move at all, but it's just like there's nothing that they could have done that would have been, like, the answer. There really is nothing that that would have been a long-term answer for the Jets. Like, the closest thing that they could have done that would have been a long-term answer for the Jets would have been to re-sign Darnold.
No,
to go back to Darnold.
You want to know what the long-term answer is? Woody Johnson sell the Jets and get a new ownership.
Yeah,
that's the answer.
You know what, though? We can't force him to do that. The owner is not going to fire himself. like whenever owners, like, there's a lot of bad owners in sports, and unfortunately, many of them own the teams that I root for.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Most of them are in New York.
Well, not some of them are in New York for sure. And, I was saying this on a previous show that, like, the issue with the Jets is really, like, people often say the Jets are a cursed franchise, but it's like there's no such thing as a cursed franchise. It's just that it's owned by the same incompetent buffoons. And that's the reason why. That's the ultimate cause. It's not because the Jets as a franchise, like the logo is cursed. It's because it's run by the same clowns that have always run it.
I'm getting tired. I'm getting tired of Giants fans, by the way, also, who are complaining that their franchise is a shithole. And I said, guys, you've won how many titles in the last decade? Like, give me a break. You guys have won Super Bowls. Like, you guys are not allowed to complain.
In fairness, they haven't won any Super Bowls in the last decade.
Maybe it wasn't the last decade. Since 2010, years. Right?
In the past 20 years, they've won twice. But I would argue, I actually think Giant fans, if anything, tend to be the opposite. I think Giant fans actually are less willing to admit that their franchise is just cooked.
Well, I think New York football is cooked. I think that's what we really need to admit. That New York football is not going anywhere for the next 4 to 5 years at this rate.
And it just happens to work out that way. And by the way, the Jets are still a very relevant team nationally, even
for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, largely for the wrong reasons, I would say. But in general, it's just like when you look at this move, like, okay, but like my question for Jet fans would be, what would you rather have them done? Would it have been better to stick with Rodgers for another year?
By the way, speaking of dysfunctional, this just broke that the Giants are re-signing Darius Slayton to a 3-year, $36 million deal.
That's not a bad move.
He's not exactly the best player.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm fine. I think I'd be fine with re-signing Darius Slayton to 3 years.
But that's not their future, is my point. Like,
No, but it's just like, but like what you were saying with Justin Fields, it's like obviously it's not their future, and the Jets know Justin Fields is not the future for the Jets because they signed him to a 2-year deal.
well, okay, let's recharacterize that for a second, because in an effed up way, Woody Johnson and the ownership will try to spin that as, oh, we brought him in for a 2-year deal, but we're going to try and turn him into the next big quarterback.
Yeah, it sounds like something they might say, although they haven't, so I don't want to put words in their
No,
mouth.
no, but I'm saying that's something the Jets would try to do.
Yeah.
They thought they were bringing in Aaron Rodgers. They thought they were an Aaron Rodgers away from winning the Super Bowl, which was total horseshit.
Obviously. It's and by the way, it's not even the funny thing about like the Jets bringing in Aaron Rodgers is that it's actually strikingly similar to what the Broncos did with Russell Wilson.
Well, or you could say Peyton Manning.
No, because they actually won a Super Bowl.
No, but I'm saying is they were a Peyton Manning away from winning a Super Bowl.
Exactly. They were. The point is the Jets were not. They were a Peyton Manning. They were a Peyton. Not only did they win the Super Bowl one year, they actually made it another year and lost.
No, but you were comparing it to say like the Broncos originally brought in Russell Wilson because they thought they were that far away. I'm just saying like that same thing for Peyton. Like they brought him in knowing that they just needed a veteran experience to lead the franchise.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is that the difference is that they were wrong. In the Jets were wrong and the Broncos were wrong when they brought in Russell
and
Wilson.
They were sadly wrong too. Yeah. Like in such an embarrassing fashion. You get hurt in year one. You come back in year two, you're a shell of yourself. Even though I can't blame him for the whole thing because the defense stunk. But
but here's the weird thing about that is that I mean, Sean Payton is making the most out of Bo Nix.
He had a good year.
And you would think that like something like that would happen with a team like the Jets. And by the way, the Jets are the worst team at developing quarterbacks. And I will say, this is just a 2-year deal. It's just a Band-Aid. That's all this really is. It's a temporary Band-Aid until maybe Jordan Travis is actually good enough. Who knows? He was you have to remember, he was like the best quarterback in college.
No, I remember. Don't get me wrong. I remember seeing his name every day in college football. But I don't trust anything the Jets say right now.
No. And here, honestly, they would have been better off just sticking with Rodgers for another year than this move. And by the way, that wouldn't have been a long-term answer either. But you know what? I think Aaron Rodgers, wherever he goes, I think he's going to excel now. Honestly, like I think it's going to make the Jets look really bad because that's always what happens with ex-Jets quarterbacks.
I have a different logical. I don't know if I want to call it logical reasoning, but I don't think Aaron Rodgers plays next year.
You think he's just going to go on an ayahuasca trip and decide he's not going to play?
Well, I don't know if I would say that, but I think teams are going to get scared of all.
Somebody's going to pick him up. You're telling me nobody is going to pick up Aaron Rodgers in the offseason?
I just found it funny, the direct connection between him and Pittsburgh, considering Mike Tomlin is one of the most buttoned-up coaches in the NFL.
You think?
And you think that would have worked? You think Tomlin would have allowed, all right, Aaron, go have fun on your Pat McAfee show appearance?
I actually think Mike Tomlin is one of the most overrated coaches and not buttoned up at all.
No. What I mean by is he doesn't like all the distractions.
Yes, that is true. You are right about that. Look, it's speculation. We don't know for a fact that Aaron Rodgers is definitely going to go to Pittsburgh. There are rumblings about him going to either the Steelers, the Giants, the Vikings.
The Vikings would be a last resort, in my opinion.
No, I think if anything, the Giants would be a last resort.
Because it wouldn't be a move if he went from the Jets to the Giants.
He won't have to physically move from wherever he lives.
Yes. Now. So I think that wouldn't be a last resort because he's already there.
But I don't know if he cares that much about that. Do you really think?
I mean, he's a California guy anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But like,
I think that he doesn't want to be on the Giants. That's what I mean. Look, of all the situations Aaron Rodgers can go to from a football standpoint, The Giants are probably the worst one.
Well, the funny part is Chris Canty said this on ESPN radio, I think a week or so ago. He said that if the Giants pick up Aaron Rodgers, they're playing for Ewers in 2026. That's essentially what he said.
Wait a minute. So his argument was that if the Giants picked up Rodgers, that's their way of tanking?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
No. I think that's dumb. First of all, if they were tanking, there are much cheaper ways to tank and more efficient ways to tank than going out and getting Aaron Rodgers.
I think what he means is that you're not going to go anywhere if you're going to bring in Aaron Rodgers to start. Like, you're essentially going to end up throwing a season away.
In what situation are the Giants going anywhere anyway, no matter what they do?
I think
even if they signed Stafford, which would have been the best case scenario for the Giants, they probably aren't even a playoff team.
But they were not a Stafford away from winning anything.
Point I'm making, they were not a Stafford away from even making the playoffs.
I mean, Stafford's a much better quarterback now than what Aaron Rodgers is. But
I agree. But the point is that even in the best case scenario, which is probably what the Giants, at least what the head coach wanted the most, what Brian Dable probably, maybe the GM was a bit more hesitant, but I guarantee you Brian Dable likely would have wanted Stafford on that roster as the quarterback. And even in that scenario, the Giants are still not winning the Super Bowl, most likely. Or not even making the playoffs, most likely.
They could get Tom Brady out of retirement, and they still wouldn't win the Super Bowl next year.
So, in what scenario? First of all, the Giants are not tanking this year. I don't think they're doing that. But there's a few reasons why. First of all, Brian Dable and Joe Shane both kept their jobs by the skin of their teeth, basically.
They shouldn't have. They should have been fired.
Not have. By the way, there's a lot of, I think that there's a lot of psychological differences between Jet and Giant fans. I don't think Jet fans are I don't think Jet fans shill for their ownership as much as Giant fans do. Giant fans, I'm not saying all Giant fans. There are some Giant fans that are like Jet fans, but I think a lot more Giant fans shill for their ownership than Jet fans do, and some of them call into WFAN. But it's serious. That's how I know this. And many of them say things like, Joe Shane's not the problem, Brian Dable's not the problem, and it's like, how can the head coach and GM both not be the problem? The head coach runs the team. The GM puts together the team. How are neither of them the problem? I mean, that is just so demented and just logically doesn't follow.
I think that's just fans making excuses because they don't want to say how bad their franchise actually is. And when you look at the Giants franchise, Dable should have been gone. Like, there should have been no traces left of Dable or Shane, to be honest. And the only reason, if you were going to keep one, you probably would keep the GM because you can always rebuild the team. But you need a new voice down on the field that's going to call the plays. So
I think if anything, you would maybe fire the GM and keep the head coach in that scenario.
I don't think Dable's a good head coach, though.
I don't think he's a good head coach. I certainly don't think Joe Shane is a good GM, although I think he kept his job because he had a fairly decent draft this past season.
Well, that and the owners came out and said, look, we're not firing after year one or year two. We need this.
It was way more than that. It was year 3.
But I think the point they're trying to make is like they didn't want to blow it up again and again and again, because every time you blow it up, then it takes another 2 or 3 years to get out of that blow up and to do anything.
Yeah, and the vast majority of franchises would have fired them both.
Yeah, I mean,
I think the vast majority would have.
I mean, you saw it in one of the clips I made for you, where I put the fan with the bag on their head. So
yeah, I think most franchises would have fired them both. So anyway, so in terms of where Rodgers will go, what makes the most sense? Look, I don't know. None of us know what other people are thinking. We can't read people's minds. That's especially true with Aaron Rodgers because he's a little bit of a wild card. So of all the teams that he might go to, from my understanding, it seems like it's between the Steelers, the Giants, and the Vikings. It seems like. And the situation that makes the least amount of sense is the Giants for him, for the team that
for him. I'm glad you said for him because that's very important.
Well, he can choose where he's going to sign.
No, but I'm just saying like that's a distinction I think people have to hear that for him because he might not pick the most ideal place to win.
Right. Like, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. Like, the Giants just seem like, honestly, he's better off retiring than going to the Giants.
Thank you. I said that.
He's just better off retiring. Just, hang it up. The
guy's a dumpster fire. The guy is not the MVP caliber quarterback that he was, what feels like a decade ago now? I mean, like...
Yeah. And by the way, the second least... and then the Steelers, I would say, would be the second most. It would be in the between the Giants and the Vikings, and I think the Vikings would make the most sense in terms of where he would go. The Steelers make more sense than the Giants because they're a better situation than the Giants are. Although, you know what, the Steelers struggle a lot on. I've struggled a lot on offense.
I don't know if he fixes the problem though.
No. But I will say Russell Wilson did go to the Steelers and had a comeback. So he really did have a comeback year last year. He played. Now, I understand the Steelers are not they're not a good late season team, and they're not a great playoff team. They haven't won a playoff game in 8 years. But I think the team that makes the most sense is the Vikings. For Aaron Rodgers, that's the team that makes the most sense because they, if anything, are the best case. They are the best situation of all the teams, of all the teams in the NFL. The Vikings get the most out of their quarterbacks. I would say out of not like the absolute number one, but like of all the teams, the Vikings are one of the best at getting the most out of their quarterback.
Well, let's make the transition and talk about a certain quarterback who just got a contract because I think this fits appropriately here with Sam Darnold because. Because again, goes to Minnesota after failing with the Jets and going and sitting on the bench in San Francisco, then ends up with Minnesota, ends up getting playing time because JJ McCarthy goes down with an injury before the season.
They likely would have started Darnold anyway.
Probably just because he's got, I guess if you want to call it experience, I don't know if I would really call it experience, but comes in, has an amazing year. First of all, I think it's the reason you just said, because you have guys like Justin Jefferson and you have, who's the running back they just re-signed? Aaron Jones.
Oh, right. Aaron Jones.
Who was really good for them, actually.
And really good with the Packers, too.
But I think this year with the Vikings was way better than any production he's put up with Packers. I mean, he got hurt a little bit, but I think that's a classic case of what you said, where the Vikings are just so good with the amount of pieces they had. You could have thrown any quarterback in there, and they would have had a good year, in my opinion.
No.
You could have thrown. I think you could have thrown Geno. You could have thrown Geno in there too. He would have had a good year.
Okay, Geno. Okay. You throw Zach Wilson in there. Would he have had a great year?
I don't know if he would have had a great year, but his numbers would have been inflated way more with Minnesota.
Well, here's the thing. I think that Sam Darnold changed my mind about quarterbacks a little bit. I think that it proves that, and Geno Smith to some extent also fits this description. I think that quarterbacks, especially young quarterbacks, are shaped by their situation, by their environment a lot more than a lot of NFL fans would like to believe.
Yes, I agree with that to some extent, but to go back to the Darnold situation, having Justin Jefferson, who is probably, and I'm sure Jamar Chase would want to have a debate on this, but I think Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the NFL right now. I think
he's up there.
And when you have a guy like Justin Jefferson who can catch passes with one hand, that makes Sam Darnold double or triple as accurate than he would have been in any other situation that he's in.
Yeah. I think that's true to some extent. Also, I think the coaching is much better. So the point is that I think Aaron Rodgers has the best shot at winning by going to the Vikings.
Now, well, you have to remember also, Aaron is much older. He's got injuries. Can he throw the ball? Like Sam Darnold has more arm. So that also helped because the Vikings are more of a pass-first offense. So that worked in Sam Darnold's favor.
Yes. Yeah, in Sam Darnold, Yeah, Darnold is like, even though he's a fairly young quarterback, and he's not a rookie, but he's still fairly young. But for a quarterback his age, he's actually very old school, which is that he's like he's a pocket passer, doesn't move all that much,
and he's going to get sacked a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And look, the thing with Darnold is that, like, even though he was terrible the last 2 games that he played, it's just like you can't take away from him the season that he's had.
Yes, but I'll go back to the point. He had a really good season. I'm not taking that away. But like I said, when you have a bunch of offensive weapons like Minnesota, they're gonna inflate his numbers. What did he have? Like close to 40 touchdowns, I think, on the year.
Something like that. But you know what? That's true. However, you can also just as easily argue the Jets situation deflated his numbers.
First of all, I think Sam Darnold never had a chance in New York.
Exactly. So he was deflated on the Jets. But you have to remember, don't forget, he was good when he played with the Niners in that small stint with the 49ers.
I mean, you could say Brock's numbers are inflated with the 49ers when he got there because of all the big-time pieces that are there.
Like if Brock Purdy was on the Jets, he would have just been another bust like Sam Darnold was considered.
He would have been cut way sooner than what happened in San Francisco. Because when you have guys like Kittle and Ayuk and who am I forgetting? McCaffrey. When you have those guys, they make you look way better than you should.
Yeah, and that's basically the point I'm making, which is that many people want to believe, quarterbacks are shaped by their environment way more than a lot of sports fans, way more than a lot of fans would like to believe. And Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, a lot of guys prove that to be true. And the Vikings are one of the better situations for a quarterback. And to me, I think it makes way more sense for Aaron Rodgers to go to the Vikings than anywhere else. Not to mention Aaron Jones, his former teammate. What does Aaron Rodgers love the most? Oh, playing with guys that he used to play with in Green Bay.
Hasn't really worked so far, though.
No, it hasn't, but it is something that he prefers. Now, and that is something to consider.
I agree with you that if he goes to the Vikings and that comes to fruition, I think that will definitely be a better situation because the pieces are already built in place for him to actually come in and be a plug-in player, which is what the Jets were delusionally thinking that he was going to be a plug-in player, which was never the case. In Minnesota, he would quite literally be, all right, we need you at the quarterback position. You throw the passes, you hand the ball off, and don't worry about anything else. You don't have to coach anybody. You don't have to do any of this nonsense and just play the game.
Well, I think that, like, if he goes to the Vikings, there is a legitimate chance that the Vikings have a really good shot at winning that division. I'm not saying they definitely will, but it's something that's at least up in the air. If he went to the Steelers, the likelihood of them winning that division, I think, is not very good. That division is too tough. But him going to the Vikings, I think it's at least a toss-up. I mean, the Lions lost both of their coordinators, and I think that that's going to hurt them a lot more than a lot of people realize. The Packers, they do okay, but, they're just kind of a shaky team. We don't really know. The Bears are a young team. I think they're going to be better than they were last year.
I think they're a wild card. And I mean that literally.
And all those teams, honestly, that entire division is a wild card if Aaron Rodgers ends up going there. Every single one of those teams is a little bit of a wild card. And the truth is, Aaron Rodgers can still play. Like, he's not the same player he once was, but he's very, very similar to what Peyton Manning was the last year of his career. Like, Peyton Manning was also on his last legs. Actually, was probably substantially worse the year that he won the Super Bowl than Aaron Rodgers was this past season with the Jets. Not to mention the fact it was also his first year coming off an Achilles injury. And you know what? That makes a pretty big difference as opposed to a year removed from that. So I think that him going to the Vikings makes a lot of sense. And I think that he can still play. He really can.
From a football perspective, the Vikings make sense. From an Aaron Rodgers mental, psychological point of view, he would probably pick the Giants. But
I'm not convinced of that. I don't know.
No, I said from an Aaron Rodgers psychological point of view, he might pick the Giants because he wants to stay in New York. But it is what it is.
I don't know how much he really wants to stay in New York, though. He was only in New York for 2 years. You think it's possible he just doesn't even want to deal with the New York media anymore?
No, well, yes and no. I want to spite them. Number one, I think, because he doesn't care. You saw the many press conferences he gave where he basically just said, "I don't give a you know what about what you guys say about me."
Okay, anybody who says that means that they probably care.
No. What I mean is like they used to speak at him, and he would just kind of ignore it and then just say whatever he wanted.
I mean, I guess that's true, but I think that I'm not convinced. Like, you think he wants to stay in New York? I don't think he wants to stay in New York. I think, if anything, he wants to move on from the city, if anything.
I don't know what Aaron Rodgers wants this. I think Aaron Rodgers wants to go sit in the darkness for 72 hours, go on an ayahuasca bender, find a witch girlfriend so that he can do that. I mean, I can go down the list and just keep naming the things
I
that.
think that he's going to go on an ayahuasca trip before he makes his decision. I think that's going to happen. And what he's going to do, we don't really know, because he's a little bit of a wild card. But of all the situations, I think the Steelers right now just don't make as much sense as the Vikings. Although I do think it makes more sense than the Giants. Just the culture of the Steelers, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Whereas the Vikings, if you plug him in, I think that situation makes a lot of sense. And it's also a division he's familiar with. The Steelers, I think, are just, if he goes to the Steelers, I just don't think that's going to work. Not to mention with the old school sort of like culture that the Steelers have.
The Mike Tomlin effect.
Yeah. And I don't think that he's going to, I don't think the Steelers are that good of a fit for him. I think the Vikings, if anything, make the most sense.
The last thing I'll say on this front, talking about Aaron, basically, is I think I heard in rumor and speculation that if they were going to bring him back, the Jets said to him, no more McAfee show appearances. That they were trying to say to him, we don't want to deal with this circus and nonsense. And he basically said no.
Yeah, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him for saying no. He was getting paid like a lot. How much was he getting paid? Like $1 million?
Yeah, but here's the thing that most people don't know about McAfee show. He pays everybody that is guests on that show.
Yeah, I know. Out of his own pocket.
Whatever budget they give him or they make. But give up the damn Pat McAfee show appearances.
Here's the thing, though. The Jets can tell him to give up the Pat McAfee show. He can say, I'm not going to, he can say no and go to a team that allows it. Because I think somebody might end up allowing it. I never had an issue with him going on McAfee. I never had an issue.
But I think that's your mistake. I think that everyone is fed up with him being on the McAfee show because they're afraid that their team is going to be the next punching bag that's going to end up on McAfee show. How many times did he punch back at the Jets while sitting on the sideline?
Here's the thing, though. If he's winning, if they're winning, him going on the McAfee show isn't going to matter. So say the Vikings sign him and they're confident that they can be a winning team with Rodgers, if they're like winning, him going on McAfee is not going to cause that many problems.
Well, okay, that's the damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario, basically, where if you're winning, you can do whatever you want. If you're losing, the microscope ends up on you.
That's exactly what it is. Like, I never cared about him going on McAfee, really. Other than, I never really cared about that. It just matters that it's just a problem if they're not winning. That's the only issue.
I'm tired. I was just tired of all the nonsense of just play football. I don't care about your thoughts on ayahuasca. I don't care about your thoughts on the COVID vaccine. I don't care about your thoughts about RFK Jr. If you're going to run for president. I don't care. That means nothing to me as a Jet fan.
It doesn't. However, first of all, the RFK thing was just like, that wasn't really Rodgers' fault. His name was just sort of floated out there.
He played along with it, though. He could have.
Yeah, that's true. He did play along with it a little bit more than he probably should have. But I also think that, like, my feelings is more that, like, I think athletes are allowed to have lives outside of their sports. Like,
right. I'm not disagreeing with that. It's just that sometimes he pushed the envelope a little too much.
Yeah. I certainly think that's true. But ultimately, all it came down to was that the Jets just weren't good. That's what it came down to.
They were not an Aaron Rodgers away.
Aaron Rodgers could have done all the stuff that he did, and it wouldn't have mattered if the Jets were like a playoff team and they were actually good. Like that's all it was.
That goes back to what I said earlier. If they're winning and he's doing all this off the field BS, then the Jets would look past it.
But ultimately, I think the Jets made a mistake. I think they made a mistake moving on from him. You know what? He went 28-11 last year. Touchdowns to interceptions. They had a clown show of coaching around him. I mean, Jeff Ulbrich was the head coach for most of that year. And it's going to be a little bit better this year. He was coming off an Achilles injury. I'm not saying it would have been a long-term answer, but it probably would have been better than what they ended up doing.
But I think Saleh got an unfair.
He did. Saleh got the short end of the stick. He definitely did. And I think we all realize that now, even though I don't think he was a great head coach. I don't think he's a good head coach, but it was better. It was a dumb decision. It was a very Jets move. It was a very impulsive decision by Woody Johnson.
Sounds about right. Well,
I think that they really should have kept, not to mention the fact he had his wide receivers. I mean, I'm not saying none of it was Aaron Rodgers, none of it was Aaron's fault. Some of it certainly was, but it is worth noting that the Jets also led the league in drops. His wide receivers dropped a lot of really easy passes. Some of them ended up being really costly.
I mean, that kind of reminds me of the Eagles before they won this year. If you remember, for the last couple seasons, they led the league in drops.
Yeah.
And they finally got that under control. And look, now they're Super Bowl champions.
But yeah, for me, bottom line is Aaron Rodgers. If I'm Aaron Rodgers, I'm looking to the Vikings. I think they are my number one choice. That to me makes the most sense. Look, it's a wild card. We don't know. I mean, in terms of him going to the Giants, I mean, you were talking about the Jets maybe getting Stafford. I don't think the Jets ever had a shot at Stafford.
I don't think they ever tried.
Because they didn't really have much of a chance. I'm not surprised at all he ended up going back to the Rams. That would have been the best case scenario, but I don't think he really wanted to.
I guess.
Moving the goalposts is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, rubbing your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. And now back to the show.
Can we talk about another former Jet quarterback too?
Yeah, Geno Smith signing with the Raiders.
Well, he got traded
to
the Raiders. But he did, but then they did sign him. So this is accurate still.
Yeah, okay, technically accurate. I should have, yeah.
But he gets traded to Las Vegas because he rejects a 2-year, $45 to $50 million a year deal and basically says, I'm out of here. Trade me. And what do? They trade him to Las Vegas to reunite with Pete Carroll.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's good or not. The Vegas even has a worse situation than Seattle, if you ask me. But
well, I would say I think it's a smart move. I think that's a good idea, though. Geno Smith wants to play under Pete Carroll. He had a lot of success under Pete Carroll. I mean, we're talking about head coaches getting the most out of quarterbacks. Pete Carroll gets the most out of his quarterbacks. I mean that's not even arguable.
I mean, I think
running quarterbacks.
I think it's an instant upgrade. I mean, you have Brock Bowers, who is one of the best at his position right now. I think he had the most catches. I think he led the league. He broke a record in his rookie season. I think him and Neighbors were going for a catch record this past season, right?
Yeah,
so,
one of the best the best young tight end in the league right now, for sure.
So that helps Geno in that regard. I mean, you have Max Crosby back, who I think you overpaid a little too much for.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they didn't trade him, but they said let's give him another 3 years. So I don't know what you do there in that scenario, but I don't know. The Raiders are going to be an interesting team to watch. Are they playoff worthy? No, but we'll see.
Well, maybe. But the thing is, you also have to remember that they're in a tough division. They have to go up against the Chiefs and the Chargers. The Chargers are probably going to be better. I mean, the Chiefs are just a behemoth, and the Chargers are probably a wild card team. They are.
Are the Chiefs still a behemoth, really? Though,
yes, they're still the overwhelming favorites to win the division.
I think there's some holes in that roster now, though.
Of course, but that's true about every roster. Like I would say, the Chiefs are certainly the Goliath in this division.
I wouldn't say they're the runaway they were 2 to 3 years ago, though.
I don't know if it's that much different. Just because of the Super Bowl performance, you could just as easily argue that they're going to have a big bounce back this season after that terrible Super Bowl performance.
Yeah, but I would say Travis Kelce's not the same player, even though he's coming back for one more year.
No, but you know what? After the Chiefs lost Tyreek Hill, they ended up winning 2 Super Bowls. So I don't know if it matters that much.
But again, Travis Kelce was still playing at a high level. Now you have an Xavier Worthy situation with the Chiefs with domestic violence, which he just got arrested for.
Although he's not being charged.
Oh, he's not being charged, but but he could get suspended a few games, though. But
I mean, maybe, but I don't know if it really affects. I think that of all the teams, of all the divisions that the Raiders could be in, I think that the only division that would be more difficult would be the AFC East.
I think you're right.
Sorry, NFC East.
Yes. Yeah, NFC East. Yeah. I don't think that's wrong. I mean, but Geno Smith, I think, needed a change of scenery because Seattle is going in the wrong direction right now. Yeah. And Vegas could be halfway decent, in a few years, possibly? And they have a high draft pick coming up in this draft, don't they?
I think so. Wait, what exactly? How much did you say the deal was with the Raiders?
What, Geno's deal? I can look it up, but at the same time, I just think the Raiders are much better. Yeah. I think it was 2 years, 50. But I'm checking.
So it's only a 2-year deal.
Yes, it's only a 2-year deal. Let's see if I could find it. Oh, the Raiders are taking on all $31 million from Seattle.
Okay.
So the Seahawks are going to pick up $31 million in cap space on top of it. Also,
right. So it's a good move for. By the way, I think it's a good move for Geno Smith to reunite with Pete Carroll. I think, like I said, Pete Carroll makes the most out of his quarterbacks, and he had success with him. So I think this makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, is Geno Smith going to be all end all in Las Vegas? No, but
you know what? That's just the reality of the situation, no matter what.
Here's the ridiculous part, though. Apparently, Smith was requesting $40 to $45 million per year, and that's why he requested a trade out of Seattle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he thinks that Seattle dogged him when it came to an offer.
Yeah, I think that's bullshit.
Of course it is.
That's bullshit. I think if anything, he just wanted to play with Pete Carroll.
Yeah, this one's a quick story because there's not much of a headline to it.
Here's the question, though. Like the Seahawks, I mean, I think it's actually better. I think both teams, the Seahawks and the Raiders, are in a better situation this year than they were last year at this time. With those moves, and like the Seahawks, they come out on top signing Darnold and having Darnold instead of Geno Smith. I think that's undoubtedly true.
I guess. I mean, I don't know if Darnold's going to be the answer in Seattle. I think they overpaid. I think they would have rather have had Geno for cheaper. But
Darnold was not paid that much. It was only 3 years, $110 million, and he's young too. He's turning 28 this year. So they only have him for like 3 years.
And who knows if it'll be all 3 years? They could dump him on the last year of the contract, to be honest.
So like I don't understand. Like it might not be a long-term answer for the Seahawks, but what long-term answer would they have? What could they have done that would have been a long-term answer for Seattle?
I think I'm more confused just by the move from Sam Darnold because, again, no Tyler Lockett, no DK Metcalf, you don't have a lot there to play for Sam Darnold. You went there for the money. Let's just be real.
Well, yeah, that's why anybody goes anywhere. By the way, I think the Vikings, going back to Rodgers, the Vikings not franchise tagging Sam Darnold, leads me to believe that they're looking to get Rodgers. I guess the Vikings are one of those franchises that tends to dump quarterbacks quicker than most other teams do.
I would say also, I actually think, and you might not believe me, but I think they were actually trying to give some respect to Sam Darnold by not franchise tagging him and allowing him to go test the market. So I think they were doing him a favor more than
they did, but that's not why that wasn't their motivation. Is the point I'm making?
No, but I'm saying is like I think it would have been a little ridiculous if they franchise tagged him after the year he had. I think.
You think it would have been ridiculous, but he had a good year.
No, I'm saying like I would have been mad as Sam Darnold if I got tagged after having an incredible year.
But like the Vikings franchise tag, I thought they were drunk for not doing it. I thought they were crazy. But I mean, look, if their goal is to get Rodgers, and I can understand. Although I would rather have Darnold than Rodgers right now. So
probably, yeah, that makes sense.
The point I'm making is that leads me to believe that's what their motivation was to go out and get Rodgers, and that's why they didn't franchise tag him.
Makes sense.
But like I said, the Vikings, they are quicker. They tend to not stick to quarterbacks as much as other teams do.
That's true. It's 100% true.
And I also want to talk about the Rams moving on from Cooper Kupp and they signed Devontae Adams. This is a quick story. So another ex-Jet. So we've been doing the show 45 minutes, all about the Jets and former Jets.
I mean, this story is just ironic because they said they wanted to get rid of Cooper Kupp because he's an older, aging wide receiver.
Which he's not even that old.
And
he's 31.
And what do? They go out and they sign Devontae Adams, who's older than Cooper Kupp.
Yeah. But would you not take Devontae Adams over Cooper Kupp?
If Cooper Kupp was healthy, I would take Cooper Kupp because I think he's got a wider range of offensive abilities. Devontae Adams is like a shogun wide receiver. You're throwing him the ball deep. Like you're not
Cooper
doing
Kupp's more of a slot receiver.
Yes. So there's more playbook with Cooper Kupp, I feel like, than Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams, either you're throwing him the ball or he's not doing anything.
Well, I guess if anything, it just depends on the situation.
And it just goes to show that even when they said, let's put the band back together in New York, it did nothing. It just did nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess, I don't know how to feel about it, really. I do want to talk about the Steelers signing DK Metcalf.
Yeah.
5 years, $150 million. Going back to Rodgers, do you think this move might be a way to try to attract Rodgers? Because they did seem to overpay for him. 5 years for a wide receiver?
Well, let's not
$150 million?
Let's not forget the headline on this one also. So he was traded from Seattle to Pittsburgh because DK just wanted out of Seattle because he knew he was not going to win there in the long term. He's, 28, I think?
27.
Or 27. He's still on the younger side of his prime.
Yeah.
And he really hasn't had a chance to go to the playoffs, really. And what shocked me more about this, I don't know if I said it with you or I said it with some other people. I said Green Bay was the shoo-in. That's where he should have gone, in my opinion. That would have been perfect because Christian Watson is not cutting it with the Packers. Like his injury status, his ego, he drops more footballs than I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it would have been a perfect fit because their receiver room is a mess. But for a clear-cut number 2, this makes total sense. Actually, let me take that back. I would say Baltimore would have been number 2, actually, because I think they were last in the NFL in wide receiver yardage last season.
Because they ran the ball so much with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry.
No, I agree, but no one could catch passes on that team at all.
That's true. But also, with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson running on the ground and having a guy like DK Metcalf in addition to them, that's an unstoppable offense.
That's my point. I'm saying, imagine if you put DK Metcalf in a Baltimore Ravens uniform and you had that direct threat downfield on top of Derrick Henry who could run, or Lamar who could run. I'll give you another one, just since we're talking about it. Buffalo. I think Buffalo would have been another great fit to have another wide receiver, because their wide receiver room is a mess. On top of it, too, imagine James Cook at your running back, DK as a wide receiver option. Josh Allen could take off and run if he needed to. That's a scary offense, too.
Yeah. Speaking of Josh Allen, he just signed a 6-year, $330 million deal. And what, 2/3 of it is guaranteed?
$250 million is fully guaranteed. So $80 million is the only amount that's not guaranteed.
Okay, so $250 million guaranteed. That's more than 2/3 of it.
It's like 85%.
That's most of it.
Yeah. I don't understand this originally, because he had 2 years left, I think, on the original deal.
Yes. I think it's just an extension.
No, they redid the whole deal.
Oh,
they ripped up the last 2 years of the deal, and they said, all right, Josh, you won MVP, which, by the way, I think well-deserved. You won the MVP.
Well-deserved MVP.
And, I mean, he still has a lot to show. He's got to get to the Super Bowl and win, because otherwise I don't think his legacy will be completely finished otherwise. But this is a well-deserved contract, because the guy is a beast, and he does everything on the field. Now, the money is a lot. I'm trying to do the math in my head. It's like a little over 60.
55. No. It's 55. 6 years. It's.
Oh yeah, you're right.
5 million.
It's like 55 million. Yeah, which is a lot of money still for a quarterback. But they needed to do it. They needed to secure him, lock him in for the next 6 years. Hopefully, he doesn't get hurt. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
But I think this is the correct move.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even see anybody arguing against it.
It's just a lot of money.
But that's what you have to do for your quarterbacks. For your star quarterbacks, you have to give them a lot of money.
Can you imagine though, looking at that guarantee, and you're going to do the paperwork, and he's like, all right, I got to write him a guaranteed $250 million check right off the top. Here you go.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but you know what? I'd say he's earned it.
No, but I'm just saying, think about that going into the season. All right, here's you just hit the lottery. Here's $250 million.
Yeah. And look, that's what you got to do for your quarterbacks. It's that simple.
I guess. But no, he well deserved. He deserved it for sure.
So I think that's it for our NFL free agency talk.
Whew. Okay.
All right, we got through that.
Somehow.
And most of it, except for that last topic, had nothing to do with, except for those last two topics, had nothing to do with the Jets. I mean, had everything to do with former Jets. Only those last two had nothing to do with the Jets.
Why do I feel like Jets bias is going to end up in the title of this episode somewhere?
So we have to talk about this sports media story. Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless are reuniting on a podcast. I don't know if they already recorded it.
They did it already.
They did it already. Okay. So
it's coming out sometime this week.
They reunited on a podcast on the Skip Bayless show because they have a common enemy.
Yeah.
They have a common enemy, and that is LeBron.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
The common enemy of the two. I can't comment on the podcast itself because I haven't seen it yet.
It's not out yet. So
yeah, it's not even out yet. Okay. I guess this is because of the spat that Stephen A. Smith has had with LeBron. And I did talk about it on the Leftovers show a little bit. But this whole thing is just so silly.
Of course it's silly. And first of all, LeBron has got to stop putting his you-know-what up his son's ass and stop defending him nonstop. It's making Bronny look worse. If you're gonna defend every little thing that he does. And you know what? Usually I'm against Stephen A. on 99% of things that he says. This one I'm agreeing with him on. That he hasn't played well, or he hasn't played. So how do you
my question though, the thing is, LeBron put his son in this situation.
He got his son to the NBA.
LeBron single-handedly got his son drafted by the Lakers. He never would have even entered the draft if his name was Bronny Jones instead of Bronny James. And not only that, Bronny James had one good G League game, and they call him up to the NBA. Like, he had one good G League game, and they called him up to the NBA.
You're also forgetting that he played 5 games with USC when and before the heart attack scenario or whatever that came up, and then he was trying to decide if he should go back to college or go to the NBA, and he chose to go to the NBA instead,
which would not have happened if it wasn't for his dad. And you also have to look, LeBron should know, and a lot of people are saying, he's just being a dad defending his son, and it's just like, I think that they're wrong when they say that.
It's
to be honest,
so wrong.
I think that they're so wrong because he has to understand that, first of all, he's not a little kid. He's an adult. He's a grown man. He's in the NBA, and he's not a little kid. So I would agree with him if Stephen A. Smith had said something out of line about, or had said something personal about it, either when he was a young child or something personal. But Stephen A. Smith never did that. All he ever did was say that, all he ever really did was just point out that Bronny James is not an NBA player or not a good NBA player, which, okay.
Or he's not ready.
Call it as he sees it. Right. But the thing is that Stephen A. Smith is a commentator, and it's his job to call it as he sees it. And LeBron, as a professional athlete for so many years, has to understand that, because that's what was applied to him. Well, so it's just he has to understand that. And to me, him defending his son, I would agree with if Stephen A. Smith was out of line. But what did he even say that was even incorrect? Because you know what? When he gets, what is he supposed to do? Lie to his audience just to protect LeBron? How big of an ego do you have to actually expect that?
It's BS. The way I look at it is LeBron is, and even through his young playing days, a very sensitive human being, very sensitive guy about every little opinion that was said about him, even though he would say, I don't care, and I don't listen to half the things. I don't listen to first day, which is such a lie. And we know that it's a lie because LeBron does care what stuff is said about him.
He cares a whole lot.
And it just didn't send a good message that in the fourth quarter of a game, he goes over to Stephen A., who's sitting courtside, not doing media. I guess maybe ESPN wasn't covering the game, and you see him mouth. Did you see the video that was put out on social media?
Video. It was unclear what he was saying. It was unclear to me what LeBron actually said, and it's also unclear what it was about.
It was him. He didn't like that he was going after his son. That's what it was.
But criticizing him, his play, criticizing Bronny James as a basketball player is not going after him. It's giving him the same treatment that everybody else is getting. That's really all it is. And given that he's a professional athlete and like I said, he understands this, you're not any commentator that just says everything that LeBron or any particular athlete likes is going to lose all their credibility.
So there was leaked audio and the quote. So basically, and I'm looking at it again. So LeBron says to Stephen A., I don't care, bro. Keep my son out of this shit.
Keep my son out of this shit. You brought him on to the Lakers.
You got him drafted to the Lakers. The biggest, I don't know if, I guess because New York debated, to one of the 2 biggest markets in professional sports. You get him drafted to.
The second biggest market in professional sports.
Well, you could say New York and LA. It could be debated. But my point is that, you're getting him drafted to one of the biggest markets in professional sports. And on top of it, you're his father.
Right. Well, it's not even just that he's his father. It's that the only reason he's on the team is because he's your son. He would not have even entered the draft.
He would not be in the NBA, period.
Right. And it's just so LeBron knows how how powerful he is. LeBron just brings his son onto the team when he otherwise would not have been drafted by the Lakers, which I'm okay with. I don't exactly have an issue with that entirely. But how do you do that and then turn around and get mad when people whose job is to commentate on sports point out, criticize him or point out that he really isn't good enough, that he really isn't that good of an NBA player?
Well,
That he's not an NBA player, at least not right now. And it's like how can you possibly do that and then do what he did and then come out and just be mad when people criticize him?
and you know what? I'm going to say it now just because I don't give a crap what LeBron says about me or if he says anything about me because it apparently gets offended every time someone talks about his
I'm
kid.
sure he's not going to come across this podcast.
I hope not. But, well, if he gets offended, he'll go after anybody who talks about his kid. LeBron, your kid is not made out for the NBA. I'm just going to flat out admit that your son cannot play in the NBA. He never will be able to play in the NBA. The only reason he's here is because of you and what your reputation brings and the power that you bring. And your son might have never made it to the NBA draft.
No, there's no way there's no way he, at least not this past season, that he made it. And it's just like, how do you to me, it's just like, how do you what do you expect commentators to do? Do you want them to just lie to their audience on behalf of you? And also, I think a lot of this is just a product of LeBron getting, I don't know, how would I say it? Getting a lot of favorable treatment in the sense of
always had favorable treatment.
I don't mean favorable treatment by the media, but I mean like favorable treatment by the teams he's been on. And that just leads him to, expect the same thing from commentators. I think a lot of it is just all of that. But look, I think that he's just wrong. He is completely wrong in this situation.
Don't say that in front of him. He'll go after you if you call him wrong.
And not only that, for everybody defending LeBron, Stephen A. Smith never said anything remotely personal or out of line about Bronny James. All he ever said was all he ever did was criticize his play on the court, which is his job.
You know what though? I'm gonna have to do my own version of tweets because I get people in the ETB sports section of the podcast or my own personal where people that say LeBron hater, and I'm like, LeBron hater? I don't like LeBron. I respect his game, but people automatically assume when I start going after his son because he's not a good player or that I go after him, they just assume hater, I'm just gonna be biased. Yeah, nothing to do with that at all.
It's also not an argument,
right? It's a cop-out argument, if you ask me. But before we finish, let's talk about the podcast thing, even though we haven't heard about it yet. What kind of ridiculous BS do you expect between Stephen A. and Skip Bayless? Because this is going to be good, whatever it is.
I don't think any of it is going to be ridiculous BS. I think there's going to be a lot of, first of all, I don't know how long it's going to be, and I don't know how much of it is going to have to do with LeBron, although a lot of it will. But it's not I think it's going to be an interesting conversation and a lot of reminiscing is what I think it's going to be.
Do you think the lawsuit comes up?
No.
You don't think they're going to talk about, because Stephen A.
lawsuit?
Stephen A. addressed the lawsuit against
Fox. He addressed it by basically saying, look, this is not the Skip Bayless I know. I guarantee, but you have to remember, Skip has not at all brought up the lawsuit.
And that's why, and I'll just be flat out, that's why I think he has not gotten any type of TV or digital offer since.
I don't think he would have gotten one anyway. I don't think it has anything to do with...
No, I actually think it does, because Skip Bayless has a following and a digital and a social media following. Someone would have taken a shot. I feel like
maybe, but the thing is, I don't think he wants to go anywhere. I think he just wants to be independent right now. He's older. He's winding down a little bit. I don't think he wants to be a part. I don't think he wants to answer to corporate suits anymore.
Well, if he did a podcast or I'm talking about under something necessarily that, or someone would license it, like a Pat McAfee show scenario. Because remember, people forget this, but McAfee's is not a contract to ESPN. It's a license deal. People forget that.
But that's true. Or maybe a place like Barstool or something like that. I could see
he loves PFT. Pardon my take. He was on their podcast.
He went on the show. But I don't know. I don't think he really needs it. And I don't really think he needs it. But I mean, it could have something to do with it. I don't really know. But
him and his wife doing a podcast.
But I think that a lot of it will be, I don't think they're going to debate each other or anything like that. There's going to be a lot of reminiscing, I think.
That would be such cliche if they did.
But they're going to talk about LeBron a lot. I think like this particular situation with LeBron, I think is going to come up for sure.
How many times do you think they're going to say, oh, well, we could have reunited. We could have reunited. How many times do you think that's going to come up?
Maybe.
Because they could. Well, do you remember the whole thing? And I know we're going a little long, but do you remember that there was a rumor when the two of them were still working at Fox and ESPN, and they were going to do an ESPN Plus version of First Take, and both sides were trying to work together to piece it together?
Yeah, but like, what would they have done that would have been so much different from regular First Take? Just more topics?
I think they just wanted Stephen A. and Skip Bayless back together. That's what they were trying to do.
And this was after they broke up?
This is when Skip had to re-sign a new deal with Fox.
Oh, okay.
Because his deal was technically up, and there was rumors that he was going to go back to First Take, and Stephen A. made it abundantly clear that with him being executive producer, he didn't want Skip back, which I thought was...
It was just sort of a been there, done that thing, like Durant and the Warriors.
Well, speaking of Durant. Did you see the whole thing with him and Skip?
Yeah, it wasn't even that big of a thing. I will say I think Skip Bayless is right.
Yeah, but the comeback from KD was actually pretty funny, though.
Yeah, except I don't think the difference is I don't think Skip is washed at all as a commentator. I think that he still has it 100%. And if he really wanted to, I understand he doesn't have any like offers or anything, but he could do everything that he was doing with Stephen A. Smith 10, 15 years ago today.
You probably could.
Still, like the difference is Skip Bayless still has it as a commentator a lot more than Durant does as a basketball player.
I'd love to see Skip Bayless on a platform that's uncensored, where he could just go and there would be no holding
platform. Completely uncensored.
No. But I'm talking about like either like on a podcast digital platform. I mean, not necessarily his. I'm just saying, like on Barstool, he'd be a shoo-in because that crowd loves debate in a sense. But I don't know. I mean, I'd love to see them back. I didn't like the show at the time, but it would just be fun to, but it would be fun to just see them fight and debate like the old times where you would see those clips go viral.
The public, and we're almost done, but what I will say is the public liked First Take a lot more than they were willing to admit because the ratings were really good.
I agree totally that I think people want them. I don't think they want First Take, if that makes any sense.
I think that they like the format. I think the public likes the format of First Take as long as the right people are doing it. It's like, it's kind of like the same thing with all different types of art. Like people like certain styles if the right people do it.
I mean, what I don't like about First Take now is that Stephen A. is the executive producer of the show.
And now he's like a revolving door of guests.
I mean, that's not terrible because we got to see Mad Dog and Monica McNutt and who am I forgetting?
Shannon
Sharp, who I actually like, by the way. I think Shannon Sharp is really funny, actually. And seeing him do other sports is kind of insane, too. He's actually good at it.
He is, though. Most former athletes are not, but he is.
And him and what's the show called? Nightcap. Him and Chad Ochocinco.
Johnson again.
Oh, is it Chad Johnson again? That show's a hit.
Yeah,
in my opinion. Even though Stephen A. made a face when he interviewed Chad Johnson at the Super Bowl talking about his sex game, which was hilarious. And he cringed. I've never seen Stephen A. cringe for anything at all.
There. And I remember Chad Johnson was talking about how he took Viagra before games.
Really?
Yeah, you don't remember that? On the Nightcap show, Chad Johnson said he would take Viagra before games.
That's a scary thought, just thinking about it a little bit.
I mean, I'd be terrified that I'd have wood the whole time.
But exactly, that's what I was thinking too. I'm like,
you think that could you think that could be like a penalty? Like maybe if you're too close to the line?
Well, okay, I'm going to make a ridiculous statement here, but You do know that Viagra was not
It was
originally
a blood pressure medication.
Yes. Okay. Then you do know that. But
I'm fully aware.
For most people who don't know that, it originally was blood pressure medication before it did what it does now.
And then one guy just had an erection for 4 hours and was like, what the hell is this?
And then had to go to the hospital. Oh, shit.
All
We're
right,
off the rails
on that
now.
note, that's our show this week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. This is Moving the Goalpost. You can follow this show across social media at MTGP ETB. Follow Empty the Bench Network at ETB Network. You follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMart. Follow Nick Morgasen at NMorgasen Radio. So that's our show this week. I'll be back next week.